There is a thick, dark liquid that costs around $8 and does something most commercial wood sealants struggle to match. Applied to raw timber, wooden tool handles, or outdoor gear, it soaks deep into the grain, repels moisture for years, and slows the rot and cracking that eventually destroy most untreated wood. Not a surface coat that peels off after one rainy season, not a synthetic finish that traps moisture underneath and blisters in the heat. A natural compound that has been protecting wood for over 1,000 years because it works with the grain rather than on top of it. One coat on a weathered axe handle, one pass on a wooden fence post before it goes in the ground. No spray booth, no primer, no professional application, around $8 at most farm supply stores, and a single quart will last the average household several seasons. This is pine tar, one of the oldest and most practical wood protection compounds in recorded history. And if you have never heard of it, that is almost entirely because the market moved toward synthetic sealants in the 1950s, and pine tar, which cannot be patented and costs almost nothing to produce, never had a marketing budget to fight back. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where we dig up what the industry left behind. Around the 8th century, shipbuilders along the coasts of Scandinavia were solving one of the hardest engineering problems of their era. They needed wooden vessels that could survive open ocean crossings, saltwater, freeze-thaw cycles, months of alternating wet and dry, without rotting apart at the joints. They had developed a process through generations of observation, heating pine wood slowly in sealed kilns to drive out a thick, dark, resinous liquid from the wood itself. That liquid was pine tar, rich in phenolic compounds, natural, resins, and antimicrobial agents produced by the pine tree as its own defense against fungal attack. They brushed it onto hull planks, onto rigging ropes, and onto the underwater sections of their longships. Archaeological evidence from Viking ship burials and harbor excavations in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark documents the use of pine tar in shipbuilding with enough consistency to confirm it was standard practice across the Norse world. Tar-treated timbers recovered from Viking-era wrecks show significantly less fungal degradation than untreated wood recovered from similar conditions. The compound was not just traditional, it was effective enough to remain the standard shipbuilding treatment across Northern Europe for several centuries. The Norse were not alone. In the Scottish Highlands, crofters and farmers were applying pine tar to fence posts, barn timber, and wooden tool handles as a matter of routine. Agricultural records from Scottish estates dating to the 17th century include pine tar in supply lists, alongside iron nails and rope as a standard maintenance material. In the Ottoman Empire, shipyards at Constantinople were using pine tar mixed with tallow as a standard hull sealant throughout the 16th and 17th centuries. Trade records from the Istanbul archives document it as a bulk commodity imported specifically for naval construction. Different forests, different production methods, same compound, same result. Every maritime culture with access to pine forests arrived at this solution independently. That is not coincidence. That is centuries of practical observation pointing consistently toward the same material. By the mid-19th century, the chemistry behind what craftsmen had observed empirically for centuries began to be understood in formal scientific terms. Researchers documented pine tar's primary active components, phenols, cresols, and guaiacol, in published chemical analyses. These compounds were shown to inhibit the fungal and bacterial activity responsible for wood decay and to form a moisture-resistant layer when absorbed into the wood's cellular structure. The key finding was the penetration mechanism. Unlike surface coatings, the smaller molecules in pine tar are absorbed into the wood's own cell walls during the first weeks after application, making the protection part of the wood itself rather than a layer sitting on top of it. When the surface layer weathers away, the wood beneath still carries residual protection from the absorbed compounds. The most documented institutional use in history belongs to the British Royal Navy. From the early 17th century through the mid-19th century, the Royal Navy maintained detailed supply records of tar usage across the Atlantic Fleet. The Admiralty's Naval Stores Act of 1704 was passed specifically to secure a reliable supply of naval stores, including tar, from American colonies after Baltic supply routes became strategically uncertain. Ships' log entries and boatswain's records preserved in the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich document routine tar applications as part of standard maintenance at every major Royal Navy port. The compound was considered basic infrastructure, not a specialized product, but a consumable as fundamental as rope and sailcloth. That institutional confidence lasted over 2 centuries and covered the most demanding operating conditions that wooden vessels ever faced. Before I continue, If you find this kind of practical historical knowledge useful, we have put together a complete resource guide covering several of these traditional techniques in one place. Tannic acid for rust treatment, linseed oil for wood restoration, diatomaceous earth for pest control, and several others. Each guide includes exact ratios, sourcing information, and step-by-step instructions. The link is in the description. But stay here. The most useful part of this video is still ahead. So why did pine tar largely disappear from the consumer market after the 1950s? The answer is straightforward. Synthetic alternatives arrived that were faster to apply, dried more quickly, and could be manufactured and distributed at industrial scale by companies large enough to stock hardware store shelves nationally. Coal tar derivatives, petroleum-based sealants, and alkyd resin products offered consistent formulations, longer shelf lives, and the kind of branded packaging that made them easy to market. Pine tar, by contrast, is slow to apply, takes time to cure, has a strong smell, and varies in consistency depending on how it was produced. It is also a natural byproduct of wood distillation, which means its supply depends on forestry and kiln operations rather than a chemical plant that can scale on demand. None of this means pine tar stopped working. It means it was a poor fit for the post-war consumer market that rewarded convenience and shelf-ready packaging over long-term performance. Products that could be applied quickly, looked clean, and carried branded guarantees won that market, regardless of how they compared over a 5 or 10-year time frame. A 2009 study published in the journal Holzforschung tested pine tar against several commercial preservatives under outdoor exposure conditions over 4 years. Pine tar treated samples showed significantly lower decay ratings than untreated controls, and performed comparably to several commercial products in the moderate exposure category. Research from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences confirmed that the phenolic compounds in pine tar remain biologically active in wood for an extended period after initial treatment. Pine tar is also listed as an approved treatment in several European national guidelines for preserving historical timber structures, where the preference is for treatments that do not compromise the material for future conservation work. If you have found this useful, subscribing and sharing with someone who works with wood, a woodworker, a homesteader, anyone who maintains outdoor structures, is the best way to make sure this kind of practical knowledge keeps reaching people who can use it. Here's exactly how to use it, and the process is straightforward. Purchase raw pine tar from an agricultural or farm supply store. Not coal tar, not pine tar shampoo, not pine-scented products, raw pine tar, most commonly sold as a hoof treatment for horses, which is the largest current consumer market for it. A quart costs $8 to $12 and covers roughly 150 to 200 square feet of raw timber. For wooden tool handles, axe heads, hammer handles, garden tool shafts, apply a thin coat with a rag or brush, working it into the grain. Let it absorb for 30 minutes, then wipe away the excess. 1 treatment per season maintains the protection well. 2 coats in the first year on new handles builds a stronger base. For fence posts and structural outdoor timber, warm the pine tar slightly before application in cold weather. It thins to a more workable consistency above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Work it especially into end grain, where moisture enters most readily. Allow 48 hours before the treated wood contacts sustained water. For camp furniture and wooden tent stakes, a light annual wipe down before storage extends the life of the wood noticeably across several seasons. One important note, raw pine tar has a strong, distinctive smell that fades over several weeks as it cures. Apply it outdoors or in well-ventilated spaces. A woodworker in Vermont started treating his workshop's exterior timber framing with raw pine tar in 2017. The workshop is a post and beam structure with exposed Douglas fir framing. He had been using a commercial alkyd deck stain requiring reapplication every 2 years. He applied 2 coats of raw pine tar in the first year. As of 2024, 7 years later, the framing shows no signs of surface rot and he has reapplied only once, in 2021. Total material cost over 7 years, around $45. His previous schedule with branded stain would have required 4 reapplication cycles at roughly $60 each. Pine tar has real limitations worth understanding before you use it. It significantly darkens most wood species on first application. If you are treating a new cedar deck or light-colored pine furniture where the natural wood color matters, pine tar will change that appearance permanently. It is best suited for applications where function comes before appearance. Tool handles, fence posts, structural timber, rustic, outdoor furniture. It is not appropriate for interior use. The smell during curing is strong enough to be unpleasant indoors, and it offers no particular advantage on wood not exposed to outdoor moisture. It does not provide the high-gloss finish that many homeowners expect from a deck treatment. The final surface is matte to semi-matte. If you want a shiny surface, pine tar is not the right tool. And make sure what you are purchasing is raw pine tar from a farm supply source. Pine tar soap, pine tar shampoo, and pine-scented cleaning products contain pine fragrance and small amounts of pine extract. They will not protect wood. The Scottish crofter who showed his son how to treat fence posts before setting them was passing on something tested across generations of hard Highland winters. The Royal Navy boatswain who trained junior ratings in tar application was transmitting knowledge that had kept ships seaworthy for 2 centuries. At some point in the last 70 years, that knowledge chain broke. Not because someone suppressed it, but because the hardware store started stocking branded alternatives that were easier to find, faster to apply, and backed by advertising that told you they were better. Some of them are better in specific ways, many are not better over time, and almost all of them cost more. The bucket and the brush are still available. So is the tar. If this video was useful, subscribe and share it with someone who maintains outdoor wood, a homesteader, a woodworker, a camper who takes care of their gear. The full guide is linked in the description. The next video covers a compound that blacksmiths have used to seal iron surfaces for 500 years. One that costs about $4 a can is still sold at every hardware store and outperforms modern rust primers in independent testing for a fraction of the price.